Hi there, this is David Dyer again, and today we're going to be talking about a very strange subject, and that is fleeing. Why would a Christian flee? Well, Jesus gives us a biblical, a scriptural reason for fleeing, and that is we're fleeing persecution. Jesus says, when they persecute you in one city, flee to the next. And so persecution is something that can happen to Christians. Any Christians, anywhere, can arrive at a point where they are persecuted. And one response, a biblical response to this persecution, is to flee, to pick up and move and flee to another place. Now this fleeing is not something nice. It's not something easy. It's not something almost anyone would want to do, except someone who really likes adventure. Fleeing is unpleasant, uncomfortable, and difficult. But I want to start with a little saying. The sooner you flee, the easier it will be. And this is the truth of the matter. Now, when should you flee? When should a Christian flee? When God shows you that persecution, severe persecution, is coming. Christians need to be led by God, not by me, not by somebody else. Christians need to be being led by the Holy Spirit when they are fleeing, when they're doing anything, in fact. But fleeing also has to be something that is led by God. You don't want to be fleeing as the wicked when no one's pursuing. You want to be fleeing when God shows you that it is time to get out. Fleeing is a bummer. Fleeing is not easy. You're going to leave everything that you hold dear, what is comfortable, what is familiar, your friends, your family. You're going to get outside your comfort zone, and you're going to have to go to a place that is new and unfamiliar. And this is not going to be easy. In fact, it's probably going to be really, really difficult. When you flee, you might have to flee to a third world country. You might have to flee to somewhere that's not as developed as your own country. So you're going to encounter all kinds of difficulties. You might have to learn a new language. You have to learn a new culture. You have to understand a new system of doing things. Things that are very basic and simple where you live today because you've done them all your life suddenly become complicated and more difficult. Things like buying a car, getting a driver's license, opening a bank account. To do all this in another language or in another culture, in another system, the person who is fleeing suddenly becomes like a child and needs a lot of help doing all these things. Fleeing is not easy. Fleeing is hard. The only thing good about fleeing is that you are sparing yourself and those who come with you the pain, sorrow, difficulty of not fleeing, of being severely persecuted. Now, because of the difficulty of fleeing, many believers cannot hear God telling them to flee. They don't want to hear, and so they don't hear. In order to hear God, you have to be open to what God is saying. I can't tell you when to flee, but God can if you have ears to hear. But the difficulties and the unpleasantness of fleeing, leaving all the safe and familiar, well, it may seem safe because it is familiar, but actually if God is telling you to flee, where you are is no longer safe. The sooner you flee, the easier it will be. To flee, you have to pack up and move. If you have time, you can consolidate your holdings. You can sell things, you can get money together, you can take some steps, you can plan. You can move in an orderly way. You can get visas. You can get permissions you need to live certain places. You can open bank accounts. You can buy property. You can establish yourself. The more urgent the fleeing becomes, the worse it is. The harder it becomes to flee. The harder and harder it becomes to flee until eventually you find yourself as Lot did, with a shirt on your back and running for your life. When push comes to shove, you won't be able to take anything with you, just whatever you can carry. You're going to flee with a shirt on your back. Lot was extremely wealthy, possibly the most wealthy person in Sodom. He had so many cattle, so many goods, that he and Abraham couldn't live near each other. There was just too much stress on the available pasture. And so they separated. But Lot liked the comfortable life. He didn't want to live in a tent anymore, so he moved into town. He moved into Sodom. And there he was grieved by the activities of the wicked. God also was grieved by the activities, and he planned to do something about it. Lot never thought about leaving. It was unpleasant because of the wickedness, but it was comfy. He liked it there. His family was there. Everything he owned was there. And so he didn't budge because of the unrighteous behavior. God undoubtedly was urging him to leave, but he didn't listen to the urgings. So finally God sent 2 angels who had to literally drag him and his family. Some of his family wouldn't leave. They wouldn't go. So just a couple daughters and a wife were hauled out of there to safety. Now this brings up an important point. Why don't we leave? Why can't we hear God when he is telling us to flee? Well, one big factor is family. We like our family. We want to be near our family. Some of our family isn't going to leave. We're going to leave them behind. We're going to miss them. We're going to miss being with them. Well, if God is telling you to leave, you should obey. Or you risk that the next family reunion will be in the concentration camp with starvations and beatings. And there you can be with your family all you want until you die. Or your next family reunion will be in the refugee camp with fear and also starvation and other kinds of abuse. You don't want this for your family and yourself. So what you need to do is obey God when he tells you to flee. The sooner you flee, the easier it will be. If you take steps today to get ready to start moving in the direction that God is showing you to move, things will be easier. Well, where should I flee, you might ask? You need to flee where God shows you to flee, not where it's convenient. I read recently about a pastor that was imprisoned in Canada for refusing to stop meeting with his congregation, I believe. And then it says that he was a German fellow who fled Germany because they wouldn't let him homeschool. So he fled to Canada, where he was imprisoned. Well, it's easy to flee to a place that you speak the language, that's convenient, that's developed, and won't inconvenience you very much. It won't be so hard. It'll be more familiar. It'll be more like home. This is natural. But where you really need to flee is where God is showing you to go. God will lead you. God will tell you things if you listen. If you have ears to hear, he will help you know. If God is speaking to you, you need to begin preparations. I know many people have heard me say this before, but here we go again. You need to get passports. Step number 1, get passports for every member of your family. To flee, you need documents. When you get to a border of another country, you need passports. And you have to get these while you can, because when things get really ugly, if persecution gets really bad, you may not be able to get documents. You may have to flee without documents. And that will be really worse than having documents. The second thing you should do is go visit some countries that you think you might want to flee to, or that you think God is telling you to flee to. If you have never been anywhere and you don't know anybody, it's really hard to go there, to flee there. Everything is new and different. But if you've been somewhere, you spent a couple weeks, you met some people, you have some Christian friends. If you go to a church meeting, for example, anyone who speaks English or whatever language you speak will be interested in making friends with you. They like to use their languages that they've learned. If you have friends who can help you, if you have a little bit of familiarity with a place, it's much, much easier to flee. The sooner you flee, the easier it will be. If you begin preparations, if you start taking steps, things will be easier. If you start thinking about liquidating some of your assets, if you start thinking about opening a bank account overseas. There's a series of videos by a guy who calls himself the NOMAD capitalist. I have no affiliation with this guy. I know nothing about him. I don't know that he's a believer, but he has a lot of videos about moving to other countries and what it's like. Visa problems, passport problems, all kinds of things that he has investigated. And he makes his living selling this information and helping people leave their country and move to another. Now he's doing this moving for financial reasons and for freedom reasons. A Christian needs to be doing this for spiritual reasons, not necessarily going to where things are easier, but going to where God tells them to go, where He knows it will be safe or safer. I cannot tell you where this will be. You have to hear from God. But what I want to say today is, fleeing is scriptural. It is a scriptural response to persecution. And the sooner you flee, the easier it will be. When you get to a new place, you have to adapt to a lot of different things. A language, a culture. Maybe there are many things about the infrastructure which don't exist or which may offend you. You may find trash in the streets. You may find windows without screens so bugs get in. You may find roofs that leak and windows that leak. You may find all kinds of difficulties. Speaking specifically to Americans, Americans are generally very spoiled and addicted to their comfort. I heard of a couple a few years ago who thought God was telling them to flee. An American couple. Well, it was an American who had married a woman from the Philippines. And so they moved to the Philippines. Well, there in the Philippines, this American encountered the third world face to face. And it wasn't very long, maybe a few months, when they scurried back to the U.S. with their tails between their legs. Why is this? It is because there are difficulties. There are problems. There are serious challenges that you are going to face if you flee. But if God is telling you to flee, then flee you must. And the sooner you flee, the easier it will be. Don't end up with a little sack of your belongings and the shirt on your back with your family huddled in a concentration camp or a refugee camp. Don't wait till that point. Don't leave it till the last minute like Lot did. Obey what God is telling you to do today. Hear His voice. Listen to what He has to say and start taking steps to move in the direction He is showing you. A lot of people are taking the position, well, I'm just going to hang on where I am and hope for the best. Well, if God is telling you to do something and you are not doing it, the best is not going to be very good. If God isn't telling you to move, please don't move an inch. Don't do anything. Stay where you are. But if God is warning you, if in your spirit you sense the voice of the Lord telling you to pack up and leave, then begin doing it. The sooner you flee, the easier it will be. You'll have time. You can prepare. You can consolidate what you own. You can convert things into cash. You can establish a residency somewhere else. This is another possibility. You don't even have to move all at once everything. You can go somewhere. You can rent an apartment. You can buy a house. You can begin getting used to that place and the culture and the language. Maybe going back and spending some time where you are. What I'm saying to you is, begin to prepare today for what God is showing you. One thing that it does say about the destruction which is coming when the man of sin takes power is that it will be sudden. There won't be any time to prepare. It is sudden destruction. When they say peace and safety, I am at peace here and I am safe here, sudden destruction will come upon them. It is sudden. There's only a warning for those who are awake, who are watching and waiting and looking above. There is a warning in our spirit to which we need to pay heed. Don't leave it till the last minute. If God is speaking to you, hear His voice and begin moving in the direction He is showing you. The sooner you flee, the easier it will be. You can take steps today that will make things much easier. Will it take away the difficulty? No. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fun. Dislocating is not a picnic. There are many, many difficulties and challenges that you'll have to confront and overcome. But all this is much better than the challenge of being hauled off and killed or spending your final days in the concentration camp. Jesus predicts in the book of Revelation there are two destinies for people during the tribulation. Those who are destined to the sword will die by the sword. And those who are destined to go into captivity will go into captivity. This probably means concentration camps with hunger and beatings and suffering. This is what God would spare you if you flee. Fleeing is scriptural, and there is also another advantage that God gains when we flee in obedience to Him. In the book of Acts, when a great persecution arose in Jerusalem and the believers had to flee, they spread all over that area, taking with them the gospel. You may find, and probably will find, that wherever God leads you to go, there He will have a ministry for you to do also. That what you have gained of Him will be useful to those people around you where you have to flee. So, brothers and sisters, prayerfully consider these things. Think seriously about them. Talk about them among yourselves. Maybe you think, I'm just another nutcase, but consider seriously the possibility that God could be speaking to you and wanting to prepare you and save you from future suffering and even death. God will warn you, He will lead you, and He will take you to somewhere where you will be safe. Amen. May God bless you.